Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Roy White. I'm the scoundrel leader, whatever you want to call me, of the G416 group. Galatians 4:16 is our founding document, and that is where Paul went back and talked to those in Galatia the second time through to say to them, to be a Christian, it doesn't matter what faith you come to. And at the time, the Galatians the Jews all thought the only way you could become a Christian, the only way you could become a Christian, would be to be Jewish. And Paul was saying to them that's not the case. Well, they became very angry then. And in the course of that, he quoted Galatians 4:16, or created the verse, and saying, "Am I now your enemy for telling you the truth?" So we in our group, we hold to the tenets of telling the truth, even if it makes people upset, because we talk about the love of Jesus Christ. We talk about what's going on in the world between the battle between Christianity and Islam, and we talk about those consequences, not about people, Christians versus Muslims, but we talk about the ideology. And we're here tonight to listen to a speaker who will talk about the impact of that ideology thousands of years ago and what it means to us here in America and what it can mean to us. And the lesson's certainly on a day of 9/11, a very significant day. I hope all of you have had a good summer, and we're looking forward to our speaker tonight. So Roger, if you'll come up and introduce Dr. Yeah, if you want to grab the mic, there you go.
Yeah, Roger.
Yeah.
I'm on your side, Roger.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, we have a wonderful guest today, all the way from Belgium. His name is Dr. Koenraad Elst. Dr. Elst is the preeminent Indologist, which means he's the expert on everything to do about India. Dr. Elst has, actually a lot of our Indian American, Hindu American friends most probably know about Dr. Elst because he's been speaking on Indian and Hindu topics for, what, 15, 20 years now? Yeah. And one of his specialties is talking about what happened about India's encounter with Islam 1400 years ago, about 10 years right after Muhammad's death. And what this does is this gives us a lesson to learn from 1400 years of Islamic history in India and taking that and applying it to today, what's happening in the US and the West. Dr. Elst is going to do a presentation to just give a general walkthrough of Islam in India. Dr. Elst. Let's give a Texas round of applause.
Because then I can, this way I can look with you to the screen. In that case, well, let me first add, am I standing in the right place for you?
That's fine, or a little close, a little further that way.
Yes, okay. This is,
That's good.
yes. What the Reverend just said about native Muslims getting converted, I like that. Me personally, I'm presently learning modern standard Arabic. I knew a bit of classical Arabic for Islamic terminology, but indeed you see the effort of helping native Muslims to outgrow Islam is now becoming increasingly important working terrain. So I'm also trying to do my bit there. Okay, Islam in India. Next. So India was quite a prestigious country in Arabia. Greece was far off, and moreover it was the land of the enemy, the Byzantine Empire. whereas India was deemed friendly as well as advanced in culture. like the science of mechanics engineering is called in Arabic Hinsa, where from, for instance, an engineer is called a Mohandis. So it's named after Hind, which is India. Yes. Okay, 2 slides up. This is Mahmoud Ghaznavi, but he only comes later in the story.
Okay, I'm sorry, excuse me. I'll catch up with you. For some reason, it's... Let me just shut it down here real quick.
The light has come back.
Yeah.
It's a computer. No, wind blows.
Yes.
Wind blows.
Right, there we have it. Okay, so there was an immediate effort to conquer India, to Islamize India. After Muhammad's death, it took 4 years for the first expedition to reach there, but that was defeated. That was a naval invasion, then followed a number of invasions over land. Each of them was defeated, until finally in 712, Muhammad bin Qasim conquered Sindh, which is the southern part of present-day Pakistan. Of course, it was a great killing, first of all simply by reasons of conquest, then specifically against the Hindu leadership. Also, it was a great enslavement of all people deemed important, of the aristocracy especially. And he gifted 5 girls, virgin girls, to his own boss, the Caliph in Damascus. Unfortunately, that was his undoing, because one of the girls said to the Caliph that she had already been taken by Muhammad bin Qasim, whereupon the Caliph was so enraged that he had the general over there, Muhammad bin Qasim, arrested and tortured to death, after which she said that it had not been true. Anyway, he is considered by Pakistan as the founder of Pakistan. Pakistan is a state of Indian Muslims, and so he was the first Indian Muslim, or at least the first Muslim in India. Yes. Then we get Mahmud Ghaznavi. He was a Turk settled in Afghanistan, which was already a first conquest. Afghanistan was controlled by the Hindu dynasty of the Shahiyas, so they were finally defeated. Then from his base in Afghanistan, he invaded India 17 times. He probably tried to conquer it, did not succeed, was each time repelled, but nevertheless he had occasion for great plunder and slaughter. He is mostly known as the destroyer of the Somnath temple, which was a prestigious temple for the Indian god Shiva. But Shiva is a very similar character as Hubal, who was the presiding deity of the Kaaba, the sacred place of Islam, which was cleansed of its pagan deities, with Allah coming instead. But nevertheless, the Arabs thought that the deities of Arabia that had been chased out by Muhammad had taken refuge in the Somnath temple. Also helped by the fact that, a coincidence of linguistics, that Manat seems to refer to Manat, which was a famous moon deity among the Arabs. The Somnath temple was then reconquered, rebuilt, and in total, through the centuries, 2,000 years, it has been destroyed 8 times and rebuilt for the last time in 1948. He didn't really conquer, he didn't establish an empire in India, but he already reached pretty far into the country. His nephew, Salar Masud Ghaznavi, conquered a few places in the northwest, Kashmir and Ayodhya. But he got defeated soon after, 1033, by an alliance of Hindu kings. This is something very rare in history, that the Hindus get together. Mostly they are a fairly quarrelsome bunch. And in this case too, because after defeating him, they wanted to liberate Lahore, which is an important city in now Pakistan, that was under Muslim occupation. But before they went in for the kill, they already quarreled among each other over the spoils they were going to make, and so they fell apart and nothing came of it. Okay, next. Now the great breakthrough came in 1192. Two kings of northwestern India had a quarrel among each other. One had fallen in love with the daughter of the other and had abducted her, not against her will though, but you know, these things happen. And so he invited the neighboring Muslim king, the Muhammad Ghori, to come and help him and to destroy this, the king of Prithviraj Chauhan. Now, Prithviraj won the battle. This was in 1191, and he showed mercy. And so he said to Muhammad Ghori, "Don't do it again." But that, of course, was not counting with the strong motivation of Ghori to take revenge. So the next year he came back, and this time he won the battle. He had no mercy at all on Prithviraj, poked out his eyes and then killed him. His lieutenants Qutbuddin Aibak, Shah Zuran Ghori, and Bakhtiyar Khilji then went on and conquered northern India up to the Bay of Bengal, destroying everything smelling of non-Islamic religion that they could find. So, like all the temples of the holy city of Benares, thousands of them were killed, were destroyed. The Buddhist universities of Nalanda, Udaipur, Vikramshila were all destroyed, burning for months on end. The library, of course, was given over to the fire. And so he's very prestigious among Indian Muslims. Pakistan has named one of its missiles after him. Okay, so a big destruction. For example, the temple of Adinath, who is supposed to be the founder of Jainism, which is one of the smaller religions in India. That place is now marked by a mosque dedicated to Shah Zuran Ghori, one of the conquerors. It is only out of the way temples that survived, and they're fairly well known among tourists, like the temples of Khajuraho, and which are famous. You see them a lot on the postcards and so on. They're famous because they have erotic sculptures on the outside. Western tourists like it. Or the temple marking the enlightenment of the Buddha, Bodh Gaya, that's also in the middle of the forest, because after all, it was seeking shadow under a tree and then sitting down and meditating. So that was his life, far away from the city. So fortunately, that place was not found yet by the Muslim armies, and it's still standing today. The first sultan of the state which they founded, the Delhi Sultanate, was Qutbuddin Aibak. That started in 1206. And so you have the dynasties of the Mamelukes, which means a military slave. That's a typically Islamic institution, military slaves, like you also had in the Ottoman Empire, the Devshirme, which is the blood tax, which meant that every Christian family had to give up one of its sons to serve in the Ottoman army. So they were slave soldiers. Then you have the Khiljis, the Tughlaqs, and the Lodis. Oh, that grave was the grave of the founder that still exists. Yes? So it became a powerful state, occupying something like half of India. It was a state, well, with a history full of atrocities. You could in fact make a really good horror movie about it. But Will Durant, the American historian, said the Muslim conquest of India is probably the bloodiest story in history. This is one of them, Alauddin Khilji, known especially for levying extremely heavy taxes. There were already special taxes for the unbelievers, but even the secular taxes he made very heavy. So this totally disrupted the system of agriculture, causing millions of deaths over a few centuries. His lieutenant was called Malik Kafur. He is one of the first native Indians converted to Islam who start playing a role. So he's important militarily. He fought off an invasion by one of the sons of Genghis Khan. Then he was also the first to penetrate South India. Only on raids, not really conquering, but already he was there. Then later Alauddin became demented and died, and Malik Kafur seized power, formerly as a regent for Khilji's son, but soon after he just simply grabbed power, and soon after again he was murdered. It's a very common event in the Delhi Sultanate. It is a very bloody story of palace revolutions. So, like that, you see the Sultanate is a long history of all kinds of intrigues, and so that's why I say you should make a movie about it. Yes. Oh yeah, and the detail I mentioned there at the last is really telling. You see, normally, if you read the story of harems in the Chinese Empire or any empire, you see that the women are always plotting to have their own son appointed as successor to the throne. Now in the Delhi Sultanate it was the reverse, because if you were known as the heir apparent, you would certainly attract assassins, and usually it was not only the prince himself, but his whole family, anyone associated with him that got assassinated. There is also an intriguing little sideshow. Malik Kafur and his emperor probably were lovers. And again, you see, this is a common theme in the Delhi Sultanate. A number of the sultans were originally slaves, who were, good-looking young guys, and they were bought at the slave market by some, buyer in the service of the emperor, taken to the empire, and to the emperor's bed. And then as they got to know the situation within the palace, gradually they set their pieces on the chessboard right, and then they grabbed power themselves. Okay, then he also is known, this is not certain whether this is historical, but there is a story about it written 2 centuries later called Padmavat, as the suitor of a Hindu queen called Padmini of Chittor, a city in Rajasthan. And so he was told of her beauty. Of course, in those days there was no photography, he had no internet selfies or whatever. He only heard about her beauty. That seems to have convinced him. He fell in love, and so he wanted her. He managed to get her husband treacherously captured, then invaded the city. And then the men came out to die fighting, and the women made a great big bonfire and threw themselves in it. So that was the end of Padmini. So we don't know exactly whether this story is historical, but it's commonly believed. Recently a movie was made about it that in India became very controversial. Yes. So the Sultanate at its height covered like 2/3 of India. Against that the Vijayanagara Empire will rise, Hindu revival, we'll come to that. The end of the Sultanate is with Ibrahim Lodi, who got defeated on the battlefield of Panipat, just outside Delhi, in 1526. This battle is also important because it saw the first use of gunpowder in the form of cannon. So this is the Vijayanagara Empire. There's a Hindu reaction against these Muslim advances. Of course, it's by far not all of India that they control, but it was an effort. It was founded by two brothers who, in fact, were reconverts from Islam. They had been forcibly converted. They came back. So this also happens. You see, often people ask, yeah, you see, but Muslim rule can't have been that bad, given that the majority of the population, even today, is Hindu. Well, you see, many people got forcibly converted, but did come back. And there were procedures for that, you see, which rituals they had to go through and so on. So these are very prominent examples. Unfortunately, it didn't end well. In 1565, the emperor was Aliya Rama Raya, who was a veteran general of a neighboring Muslim state. And so he had Muslim friends, and he recruited two people that he knew from his time in the army as generals in the Vijayanagar army. Then later, Vijayanagar got attacked by a coalition of Muslim neighbors. There was a big battle in Talikota. The Vijayanagar side was winning the battle, but then suddenly these two Muslim generals switched loyalty, and then the whole, strategic array was in jeopardy, and they lost. And the next is that their whole capital got burned down, never to be rebuilt. This is Babar. He was a descendant of Genghis Khan, the Mongol. That's why the dynasty he founded is called the Mughal dynasty, which is Persian for Mongol. And he's known in India because in around 1990 there was a big controversy there about the Ayodhya temple, which is the birthplace of Lord Rama, worshipped by the Hindus. And so that temple was replaced by the Babri Masjid, the mosque of Babar. And some communist historians claim that there had never been a temple at the site. Meanwhile, the temple has been dug up, excavated, so it's totally definitive that they were wrong. Okay, so the initial Mughal Empire is still very small and is surrounded by a number of Muslim states, namely the leftover parts of the deceased Delhi Sultanate. All the provincial governors became independent. But so one after another is swallowed by the expanding Mughal Empire. One of the provincial governors was Suri. He had a dynasty in Bengal, far from the center. Now, to hold his own against the big majority of Hindu population, he started compromising. And so one of his generals was a Hindu, Hemachandra. Next. And so Hemachandra managed to, conquer a number of parts of India, defeat also the Mughal Empire, and went to Delhi to be crowned as the Emperor of Delhi in 1556. However, a few weeks later, in the Second Battle of Panipat, he was defeated by General Bairam Khan, who was the general of the Mughal Empire and the regent for Emperor Akbar, who was still a child. But he had the captured King Hemachandra beheaded by the infant Akbar to get him used to the life of a jihadi. Thereby he gained the title Ghazi. You see this a number of times in Muslim history. People who are called Ghazi are jihadis who have killed a non-Muslim with his own hands. So as long as you are just a camp follower in the jihad army, you are just a jihadi, but among them, someone who really did it is a Ghazi. Nevertheless, Akbar is known precisely as the most tolerant of Muslim rulers. Because later, as he grew up, he changed his mind and he thought, you see, all these Muslim kingdoms have always had a hard time fighting off these ever rebellious Hindus. And it is better, he said, well, you know, if you want to have a Muslim empire, first of all, you have to have an empire, a stable state, and that becomes prosperous. And for that, it is necessary to strike a compromise with the Hindus. Okay, they should still remain second-class citizens, but good enough not to provoke them. Interestingly, he wins the battle of Haldi against rebellious Hindu forces, but being aided himself by other Hindus. And so when he sees these Hindus fighting Hindus, he is joyous and he says, Hindus wielding the sword of Islam. There are important modern parallels to that. We will come to this in the interactive period. And he founds a halfway religion, a bit Islam, a bit Hindu. And so it's not really clear what it is. There is discussion about what it is. In fact, it only had 29 members in total. It made him build a city dedicated to this new religion. And this is built on the confluence of two rivers, symbolizing the confluence of Hindu and Islam in his own new religion. So the religion was called Dini Ilahi, the divine religion, and the city was called Allahabad, the divine city. Okay, he had a policy of recruiting Hindus into his army, but not just like that. He didn't make the same mistake that the Vijayanagar emperor had made. And so he takes hostages to assure their loyalty, namely their daughters, who end up in his harem. And so one of them is called Jodha, and that's in Indian secularist mythology, or anti-Hindu mythology, a very important character, because she supposedly symbolizes Hindu-Muslim unity, the syncretic culture, or composite culture, as they call it. Again, this story is of doubtful historicity, but it's very popular. Okay, this is Alamgir or Aurangzeb. He was the great-grandson of Akbar, and by now we speak of about 1670. He died in 1707. Now, he was, in fact, recently there's a lot of furore about him, which I'll explain. He was also the son of Shah Jahan, the one who built the Taj Mahal. And he didn't like it at all. In fact, he ended up imprisoning his father. And this Taj Mahal, he thought it was a waste. You see, building a big grave monument. Now, of course, the earlier emperors also had big grave monuments. The one I showed, you know, there was only a small grave. That was relatively modest. But there are, like Humayun, who was the second Mughal emperor. In this case, probably, you know, he was particular about it being a waste because it was dedicated to a woman, to the queen, you know, to Shah Jahan's wife who had died. And so that was a waste. To the emperors, that could still be defended. But the fact that he considered this a waste is significant. You see, he was a very ascetic man. For instance, he refused to live off tax money. And now here, of course, you might think, oh, if only we had presidents like that. But he instead made these white skull caps that Muslims wear. You know, he made them by handiwork, embroidery, and he sold them, and that's what he lived. So he was a very pious man, a very religious man, but he's mostly known as a great iconoclast. So under Akbar, with his compromise policy, Hindus had started rebuilding their temples. Now again, you see, thousands of temples were demolished. This, for instance, is the Gyanvapi Mosque in Varanasi, which stands at the side of one of the sacred places again, the Kashi Vishwanath temple. Now in this case, it's not always like that, in this case, a part of the old temple was integrated in the new mosque, just to show off the victory over infidelism. You know, you have many of these cases, like the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus is a similar case, or the Hagia Sophia. You see, they simply took over the church of the Byzantine Empire, the main church, and turned it into a mosque. You see, they plastered over all the paintings, and they built 4 minarets on the side, but otherwise the building remained just as it was. The Hindus, by contrast, had a policy of hiding the idols when they saw, you see, that the temple was about to be destroyed. They spirited away the deity in there and hid it somewhere. Like, for instance, this is the Brahma temple in Varanasi. The Brahma statue that you see there in the green, that was thrown into a nearby pond. They must have been in a great, great hurry. So they threw it wherever they could, you know, just find it. Yeah. And then 200 years later, they dug it up again, and when it was time to build a new temple, they did. Next. This is Shivaji, a Hindu who started fighting back and who conquered the whole part of the Mughal Empire. Yes? This is his successor, Peshwa Bajirao. Peshwa means Prime Minister. If you know your Christian history, you might know that the Merovingian Empire in France, Belgium, in 400, 500, 600 AD, there also the kings gave way to their own prime ministers, the court mayors, who became the Carolingian dynasty. Well, this is a similar story. The legitimate kings gave way to their own prime ministers, who became a dynasty in their own right. However, that dynasty got defeated by yet another Muslim invader. It was not so consequential because the Peshwas remained the dominant power in India. So at that time, the Mughal Empire still exists, but is only a ghost of itself. Doesn't exercise real power anymore. Next. However, the rot had set in. At one point, the Peshwa in 1771 prostrates before the Mughal Emperor, even though he was the most powerful man in India. He could right there have folded the structure of the Mughal Empire, and he didn't. That's typical mental weakness that nowadays, of course, is also very strong. European powers could easily deal with Islam if they wanted to, and not step backwards, as they are doing now. This is the mutiny, at once the end of the Mughal Empire. So there is a rise in revolt by both Hindus and Muslims, and there is some kind of mutual deception. To the Muslims it is said, oh, we're going to rebuild the Mughal Empire. To the Hindus it is said, we're going to rebuild the Peshwa Empire. Anyway, they got defeated by the British. Okay. So then you get the British Empire, in which the Hindus take advantage of the new opportunities. They lose a lot of British economic policy, but they get new opportunities to become lawyers or whatever in the new establishment. The Muslims, however, don't. They still feel proud and they don't want to soil their hands with anything infidel. So they lose their steam, but they found a political party, the Muslim League, supported by the British. And in fact, they start becoming collaborators with the British against the Hindu-led freedom movement. In 1919, when the Ottoman Caliphate in Turkey is in danger and finally abolished, they start an agitation in India, the Khilafat movement, which doesn't really go anywhere. In fact, it's a tragicomical movement because it tries to prop up a structure that the Turks themselves are busy abolishing. However, next, their movement is supported by Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi is the paragon of a confused politician who doesn't understand anything about Islam. And So he strikes an alliance between the freedom movement and the Khilafah movement, which is, for all kinds of reasons, a very contradictory thing. But you see, when the movement becomes violent, which is against Gandhi's own principle of non-violence, then he calls it off. And the Muslims are angry with him, and they start attacking Hindus, killing thousands of them. Yes. So this fails. Next. There are also a number of critics of Islam at that time. You see, never in Indian history have Hindus criticized Islam until 1875. Then there is a movement, the Arya Samaj, which starts doing this, and so a number of them are being murdered. For example, here, Swami Shraddhananda. Interestingly, he had written a book about how to counter Islamization, and where already he points to the dangerous factor of demography, where Muslims have more children than everyone else and are ultimately bound to outbreed everyone. Then you have the Pakistan movement. In 1921, the Hindu freedom movement announces full independence. This is then their new goal. And so in 1930, the first Muslim starts reacting to it. Oh, if you want to have your state, we want to have our state. This is Muhammad Iqbal. And by 1940, this idea has caught on in Muslim circles. The Muslim League passes a resolution in favor of it. One of the Hindu politicians proposes then, okay, if you want to have a separate state, fine, let's do it clean. Let's have an exchange of population, all Muslims to Pakistan, all non-Muslims to India. However, this is vetoed by Gandhi, although the idea would have saved millions of lives. Yes. So finally, this is accepted. The border is not even certain at the time when independence is announced. And so many people are trapped on the wrong side of the border. They quickly try to get to the other side of the border. During these flights, about 2 million people get killed, mostly Hindus by Muslims. Also, there is no moral equivalence at all, because the Hindus fleeing are really refugees, whereas the Muslims fleeing are not really refugees. They are people just going to their own promised land that they themselves had created. Mahatma Gandhi gets, let's say, punished for it by the journalist Naturam Godse. One of his accomplices, Madalal Pahwa, whom I have still interviewed, was a refugee from West Pakistan. The job had been assigned to him to look after his mother, his aunt, who didn't want to travel by train. She didn't trust the train system. She was from the old time. And so they together went on foot. That's why they survived. Their 20 relatives went by train and got massacred there. Then in 71 you get the Bangladesh War, another genocide, and really a genocide in the real sense of the term. The Pakistani army earmarked all the Hindus for murder. Officially there are in total about 3 million dead, of which 80% Hindus. I doubt the height of that figure, could be less, but anyway, it's very many. It was also a war in which rape systematically was used as a weapon. About 400,000 women officially. But then the Indian army intervened, and in less than 2 weeks they had achieved victory. Next. So here you see General Niazi for Pakistan signing surrender. That war was truly a just war. You see, it was provoked by the enemy, I mean by Pakistan. It was conducted very efficiently with as little bloodletting as possible. It was very honest, in the sense that very often in history you see people appealing to some stronger third party to come and help them. And that party does help them, but then stays on. Whereas here, the Indian army, as soon as they had defeated the Pakistanis, cleared out the area and left this territory as independent, and it became Bangladesh. So the right thing to do is what General Niazi did there. which is in fact the meaning of the word Islam, which is to surrender.
Thank you, Dr. Elst. We're going to take some questions. We're going to go up to the stage. Thank you very much. Please give them a round of applause. The all set up. What we're going to do is Roger and I are going to carry on a conversation asking some questions, but we'd certainly love to have your questions also. So Mike will handle this microphone over here. So we'll get settled up top, and then either way, that's where your donations will go to tonight. So we're up on the top. Roger, why don't you take the first question? And Dr. Elst, why don't you sit in the middle? You're in the hot seat. Okay, I'll get rid of these. There you go. Have a seat. Roger?
Well, first of all, that was a great presentation. That essentially takes 1,400 years of history and condenses that into slides. Koenraad, when you talk about, we've seen this movie before, treachery, when the Hindu king pardons the Islamic king. What lesson have we learned, through that? Is that something that's a human flaw, or is that something that's related to Islam? What is the causative factor?
Well, the attitude of non-Muslims, of course, clearly seems to be a general human flaw. And in fact, each of the flaws you see here committed by Hindu kings is now massively being repeated by our Western politicians.
How specifically do you see that occurring? What are some examples of this complicit or dimming type of attitude from the West that obviously caused, millions of deaths in India?
Yes. Okay, let's start at the level of the media. The way they massively are on the side of Islam. You have had all these terror attacks in recent years. And you see that each of them is an occasion for more propaganda by so-called moderate Muslims. You see there is a nice division of labor between radical and so-called moderate Muslims. And whenever the radical Muslims do anything, a red carpet is rolled out for the moderate Muslims who can make even more propaganda. Best example, example, in Paris there was this massacre of the editorial board of Charlie Hebdo. Now that was an attack on the fact that they had criticized Islam. It was not because they were journalists or cartoonists or so, no, specifically Islamic criticism was being punished with death. Now, on that occasion, from a purely journalistic viewpoint, it would have been normal to bring to the studios representatives of Islam criticism. But just the opposite was done, you see. The people of the victim group were totally ignored everywhere. You see, the space was given to representatives of the perpetrator.
And we see that here in America. The first group you see up here before the media is always the Council for American and Islamic Relations, who ends up telling everyone, we don't want any pushback, we don't want Muslims to be persecuted, we're fearful of that. So again, the victim card is played. One of the things that you said that I thought was very interesting, and from a historical standpoint, you often hear, all you hear about India is that the reason why India is the way it is, or at least so much of it is influenced by the British. If the British, theoretically it's hard, but if the British had not come in and done what they did, in my understanding, they basically kind of stopped the movement and thwarted the Muslim movement. If that had not happened, what do you think India would look like today?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that the Peshwas, for all their flaws, nevertheless, were progressing and would gradually have folded the Mughal Empire after all. So, in fact, things were looking fairly bright. On the other hand, the British also did something against the Mughal Empire. In Bengal, they liberated the Bengalis from the Mughal rule, even though it was to bring them under British rule. But in general, they were very popular with the Bengalis, were deemed as a far more benign power than the Mughals had been.
And they really helped promote, at one time, the choosing Hindus over the Muslims, the Arab League.
Yes.
They were complicit in some of them.
Right, but that changed, you see, later on they favor the Muslim side because in their calculations of how to exercise power with the least possible financial effort, some alliance with the Muslims was deemed, the best in the circumstances. And that incidentally refutes the current Muslim propaganda that Islam is naturally anti-colonial or so. In fact, colonialism has a number of times favored the Muslim side, there in British India, in Dutch Indonesia, or for instance, Mussolini, when he invaded Ethiopia, supported the Muslim minority against the Christian.
Yeah, and I always like to say, people, there's a lot of faults with the British Raj, the British colonial empire. But I can't imagine a Mahatma Gandhi in an Islamic empire. They wouldn't believe it. I mean, it's because it was bred in a more civilized society that we got independence through largely a non-violent movement. That wouldn't have happened under Islamic rule.
Right.
Don't you agree with that?
No, I agree.
Yeah.
You have a particular theory that Roger, you brought up in the radio show. Let's talk about that I think is very fascinating.
Yeah, it's the theory that you expounded the first time called negationism.
Yes.
In response to or in respect to the denial of history in India and in the West. Can you just talk about that?
Yes, so the term negation, anglicizes the French term négationnisme, which was originally specifically used for the denial of the Holocaust. Then later it got expanded to, for instance, denial of the Armenian genocide by the Turks, and so generally denial of history. Now, I understand that in America too that has become a major issue. So, you see, the left specializes in grabbing power in the cultural, educational sector and then rewriting the textbooks to suit their own purposes.
And do you see that happening in India?
In India, absolutely. In India, it has to do, you see, the communists have rarely been in power, last the 2004 to 2009, in coalition with Congress. But in the cultural sector, they've been very powerful since about 1970. Indira Gandhi at that time was in trouble, so she struck an alliance with the communists with the understanding, okay, the formal political posts and so on, the little perks of being, you leave that to us, and then we leave the cultural sector to you. And so the communists use that to the...
So you have a model of the Marxist communists working with the Islamists.
Yes.
With both sides thinking that when we get in charge,
Right.
we'll vote these guys off the island, and they're all thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
What in reality happened when they came to power?
Well, you see, the communists should be happy that the Muslims are not in power in India, because then you would get a repeat of a situation like in Iran, where they ousted the Shah, so the Muslims and the communists together, and then the communists were thanked for their services by exile at best. Similarly, after the partition of India, the communists had propagated in favor of the partition. Then when it happened, they were chased out of East Pakistan, East Bengal.
And we see that being repeated today, where the Islamists and progressives, communist, socialists work together, where helps them both. But at the end of the day, they're all thinking it's about power when we come to power. So that's why you see these groups. Historically speaking, one of the lessons that we can learn is when you see groups like either Black Lives Matter groups or the Islamic Society of North America or CARE working with groups that it may not appear as if they have a lot to do with each other, but they're all pushing an agenda that removes the current power structure that will create a void for them to move into. So Roger?
Yeah, and like you said, Black Lives Matter and Islamic Society of North America have nothing in common. I mean, they're both supremacist organizations. They're both predators in the same shark tank. But the confluence of the interests, I mean, I contend personally that communism is not as dangerous as Islam. Would you agree with that?
Probably. During the Russian Revolution, the communist side was still stronger. You see, at that time also they had appealed to the Muslims in Central Asia to rise against the Tsar. And then when the Tsar was ousted, well, the Muslims were sidelined at best again. Mosques were destroyed and so on. So at that time it was still communism that was the stronger party. No, it is true that in the long run, Islam has a better natural power.
Staying power.
Yes, staying power, because it appeals to something fundamental in men. You see, a religious dimension which communism denies. Also, it's more viable in a very practical sense. Whatever else is wrong with Islam, it is strongly pro-free market, which is, well, you see, whatever else, technology and so on that comes in that makes it better or not so good, at any rate, it's more viable than socialism. Muhammad himself was a trader originally, and that has remained in Islam. And so that's one of the more realistic sides of Islam. And in that sense, it has more staying power than communism.
Well, I encourage, if you have any questions online, feel free, or if you have questions, come up to the microphone. Talk about numbers. We just kind of we never really kind of gave a number, but I know history speaks widely as far as the numbers. How many Hindus have been killed under the knife of the Muslim hordes? What are historically numbers you think that are reasonable?
Well, a number you find bandied about on the internet often is 80 million, 80 to 100 million killed during the Delhi Sultanate. Now,
And that spans at what?
Yeah,
500?
but wait a minute. That's a figure given by the historian Professor K.S. Lal, which is criticized by others. Now, what he said was that many people have disappeared from the natural demographic curve. Now, they have not all been killed by the sword.
Right.
You see, for instance, the agricultural system was totally disrupted by the Sultanate system of taxation. That certainly has killed millions of people. Only, it's hard, in the countryside, no writing and so on, to do this exact.
Sure.
So it's a very large number, that's for sure.
Right, and we don't even hear that number, at least in the West, and understand accountability.
Just quickly, to that point, we can quibble about numbers all day till the cows come home, but just looking at what's happening around us, anything to do with Islam or Islamic conquest, it's not that hard to imagine that large numbers were either wiped out, sold into slavery, converted. So it's not inconceivable.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes, if you were to have 10 minutes with the President of the Director of National Security, what advice would you give him in dealing with the current Islamic threat?
Right. Well, you see, they focus on the security aspect, and I mean, that's what the President should do, of course. So it should be dealt with, but you see, that's a temporary emergency measure. So it has to be done now, but the long-term solution for the Islam problem is to bring them out of the prison house of Islam, which I think a church like this one is doing very well. So that is the ultimate solution, but for emergencies, for now, in the short term, some security action may also be necessary.
So in other words, waking his Muslims up to the reality of Islam.
But you have to speak the truth and be willing, because oftentimes the people who defend Islam the most are non-Muslims.
Yeah, so many Muslims have only a very limited knowledge of Islam, because in the Islamic world there are many of these, popularized textbooks that leave out all the hard parts. I remember the first time when I came in India, at that time it was practically a Soviet ally. And so every city had these Soviet bookshops. And there you see, I saw a funny aspect of communist rule was that, again, they had similarly these innocuous, idealizing stories, like you see storybooks for children. Mother, tell us about Lenin. So similarly, you see, Muhammad is for many Muslim children a familiar character of whom they don't know at all what atrocities he committed.
Larry?
Thank you. In the United States, we read about the country of India, and we think of it as a country, but I've read that it's a large area, lots of population, hundreds of languages and dialects, many religions. Is India a unified country today, or is it constantly under struggle and war and battle,
Cultural
and confusion?
Well, the Victorian story to unified India. And Winston Churchill said, India is not more a unity than the equator. But I disagree. You see, India had an ideal of unification already since about 1000 BC. And that ideal was first almost realized by the Nanda and Maurya empires about 400 to 200 BC. Then it was more fragmented. Then you had the Gupta Empire about 500 AD. That also came close. It was no South India, but all the rest. Then again, the Mughal Empire comes close. Of course, that was a foreign empire, but still, I mean, the element of unity was there. And then you get the British. So there is a strong element in Indian history of unification. And that is only at the political level. It's even more outspoken at the cultural level. And this was fortified, for example, by the practice of pilgrimage cycles. You see, many people, as they got a bit older, children who were grown up, they went for 1 or more years on a grand tour of India, going to all the holy places. And so that way, you see, many Indians had a certain consciousness of India as a cultural unit.
Let me, we study the textbooks and you see it referred to often, and I'm going to make some probably broad generalizations, so any of my Indian friends in the audience, please indulge me, but the caste system that is within the country, how does that play into either working for the Islamists or against the Hindus in terms of maintaining a culture, or is that something they've been able to exploit? Because you would think on the surface that would be a way for the Islamists to take advantage.
Yeah, no, the British exploited that. The British did one caste against another and so on. They were not so much against the principle of inequality, because British society at that time was also very unequal.
Caste system.
But so they saw the political expedience of it. Now, under Muslim regimes, that didn't play at all. The founder of the Indian Communist Party, N.R. Roy, he writes in his book, oh yeah, you see, the masses yearned for inequality, and so they welcomed Islam, so that is a total fairy tale. And in fact, you can see within Muslim society, it's also quite unequal. Like, for instance, in Pakistan, most of the lowest castes, the sweepers and so on, those who do the dirty work, have by now become Christians. You know, when you read about them doing the dirty work, you might get the impression, oh, this is what the Muslims do to Christians. That's not exactly the history. They already did this work for centuries, and now they have become Christians. And in a way, you see, initially, the state of Pakistan somewhat preferred that, because, you see, Muslims also have a certain condescension for this kind of work, whereas Christians, you know, Christianity is known to have a certain respect for labor. And therefore, you see, if those unimportant people become Christians, okay, well, that we can tolerate for the time being.
Okay.
It's been an impediment in the sense, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, in the sense that it allowed Islam to exploit that and say, hey, look, we work for equality, whereas, you know, these religions are for caste system. So it gave them an opening to use that, just like they do now with the African American people saying that Islam is the original
Or the
religion.
economic divisions.
Yes.
And which is, you know,
Yes.
a caste system. That's what I would have thought, that they would have taken advantage.
Well, yeah, it's a relatively recent development because in most of history, inequality was treated as something normal. In fact, the Quran itself favors inequality. You know, several times it is said explicitly that if you are rich and you are pleading for redistribution, you are being ungrateful to Allah who has given you the boon of wealth. And so, you know, it is normal, it should be like that there is inequality. Then a separate chapter, I mean, that sort of follows from this, is that indeed there are extreme forms of inequality. There is, of course, the inequality between men and women, but then there is slavery. You see, you see, talking to white Americans, I think, you know, there is a history of racial slavery. Nevertheless, that is only something that came about in particular circumstances. Slavery existed much earlier. The first transatlantic slaves had been bought from Arab slave traders, which, you know, who had been in the business already for 1,000 years. There was also some slavery among Africans mutually, as there had been in the Roman Empire among whites mutually. So the Arab factor is very important. They had more African slaves than here Americans ever had. Moreover, they treated them more harshly. Often you see, it is said in favor that the slaves sort of became part of the household, maybe. On the other hand, you see, there is something by which you can immediately see the difference. In America, you have millions and millions of African Americans. In Iraq, at one point, 9th, 10th century, Africans were about half of the population. Today they have disappeared.
What happened?
Yes. Well, what happened, I don't know if I should say that in a church, but some very unpleasant things happened to them.
Michael.
Koenraad, why is there a deep strategic, meaningful partnership and a relationship between Israel and India that exists today? And why does it not exist between India and America?
Relationship, why does there's a great relationship between India and Israel. Why is that relationship not replicated between India and America?
Well, partly there's the negative image that American imperialism has acquired. And so with Israel there is a very specific focus for their alliance. You know, they're both having trouble with Muslim countries.
Common enemy?
But you
More
see,
well defined, that they both understand. I think that's one of the challenges. We're not willing to discuss and define the enemy, and if you want to hit a target, the first thing you have to know is what the target is. And the Israelis have done that, and I think Indians, because they have lived under that, have defined it.
right, right, but there is a certain evolution going on. For a number of presidents in the past have tilted towards Pakistan. It is under Trump that the equation is reversed.
I think geography is also, they're much closer together. Their common interests, when they sneeze, they don't just get a cold, but it can really be damaging to them. We're still somewhat removed, and the sheer numbers are an issue. But Mike?
And then there's a situation on the ground. You see, even when there was a political alliance with Pakistan, the Pakistani people were totally against America. Whereas in India, even though you see some leftist intellectuals criticize America, you see all the Indians are totally for America, and you see if possibly they can afford it, they send their son or daughter to study in America and to stay there. So in a way, you see now the government position is coming in alignment with their people's position.
Do you think that's changing? Do you think the change in relationships between India and America, do you think it's improving, or is it still?
I personally feel so.
Okay, well, go ahead with your question. Thank you.
No, I just wanted to add to what you just were asking. You brought up a very good point. I think I definitely disagree with the fact that India is only close to Israel. Yes, India is very close to Israel. In fact, there's a lot of military exchanges and everything going on a day-to-day basis. In fact, I know from personal experience, one of my cousins actually does tell me what's going on. The other thing is Prime Minister Modi and also Trump have had a very personal rapport that has been established over the past year and a half.
Well, let me add, within the Indian community, how do, and I know it's a big generalization, how is Trump viewed within the Indian community?
I would say there's
Microphone line up to you.
I would say there's a bit of a dichotomy because people like me, I'm a very staunch Republican, and no matter what, we do support right, for the simple reason that I tell everybody I support the right in India, I support the right here.
Okay.
In fact, right to me, right is the only right way, basically. Indians, a lot of, I'm sure Koenraad and Roger would agree with me on, a lot of Indians are fiscally conservative, but socially they're very liberal. And when you see a lot of them supporting the Democratic Party and all that stuff. But now I think a lot of them have actually gravitated towards the right because of various reasons. One of which being social media playing a big part when they see all the history of India, the atrocities being committed, and atrocities that have been committed and all those stuff. So a lot of people are gravitating towards the right for obvious reasons and seeing what's happening in India itself.
They're seeing the movie being repeated.
Yeah. So I personally, because like for example, this past elections, I know personally that a lot of Indians have voted for Trump. A lot more people have voted for Trump than when they voted, they used to vote for the Democratic Party.
Yes, in Holland, for instance, just near where I live, there is a very strong Hindu community.
Where is this, sir?
And so they are totally, they voted for Pim Fortuyn, the first anti-Muslim politician. Now they vote for Geert Wilders. The same situation. In England, they vote for the Conservative Party. Until 10 years ago, they were with Labour, but now they're all with the Conservatives.
Exactly. One more thing I wanted to tell you, Mr. Elst, is the fact that even though a lot of people think every Muslim follows just one, they all fall under the book of the Quran, and they all pray to Muhammad or whatever, or Allah. It is a very divided society. In fact, it's a very, very divided society. It's just because of the fact that they have a CAIR or CAIR or anything that says, represents them, that they look unified. But behind, if you really go back, it's a very, very highly segregated religion, given the fact that a Sunni will rather come and befriend a Christian or a Hindu first, then befriend a Shiite. In fact, he will slit his throat first, and then say, okay, then we'll...
Yeah, that is one of the weaknesses of Muslim society. In fact, the last few years, it was actually a very bizarre sight in Syria and Iraq. They were expending all this effort fighting one another.
Correct.
Shias fighting Sunnis.
Sunnis, exactly.
I mean, if they had used that energy to fight us, we'd have a hard time.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it was
In fact,
in a way a blessing.
it's a blessing in disguise, exactly. It's a blessing in disguise. That's why when I see them killing each other, good riddance. At least that's one way of the world can get rid of this nonsense, because you know what? Because eventually what's going to happen is the evil, the whole tenet of the whole religion is so evil, and it is going to crumble under its own weight, because actually it builds on itself. Evil will crumble because it's very similar to this. A good building will stand for the next 100 years.
Right.
A weak building without foundations will crumble in the next 5 years.
This is obvious. Islam is certainly going to come down.
Exactly.
Only, you see, in our lifetimes, I think we still have to deal with it.
I think one thing we would be remiss if we didn't ask, living in Europe and Belgium, we asked this question the other day, and Mike, if you haven't passed the plates around, if you'll pass the donation plates around. the question of freedom of speech, the ability to have the discussion that we're doing right now, how would that be received in Belgium or other countries in Europe? As you know, as far as what this freedom.
Well, so far the state, I think, would not intervene unless they say something that is explicitly in contravention of hate speech legislation. So they let you, in theory, criticize Islam, but then owners of the halls where you want to gather and so on will feel under pressure to stop you. And so it's rather difficult, it's not impossible.
Is Belgium have more freedom to do that than you say in France or in Germany, or
It's a similar situation.
similar? Okay.
Well, in fact, in those hate speech laws, Roy, that Koenraad talked about, there's no getting away from that. They can define anything as hate speech, and it can be pointing out any atrocity by a Muslim.
I mean, this historical briefing that you gave, you told the truth, but if there were Muslims in here who found that offensive, going to local officials, they would ask for those presentations. I would think, at least from what I've read, but not having lived there, and obviously you haven't been arrested.
No, but a trial has been started against me, but at some early stage the judge has dismissed it.
Oh, okay. So good for you. So,
Just also glad to point out your northerly neighbor right there, Austria, is basically, they've shut down quite a few mosques. They've basically deported a lot of these imams who are causing trouble by giving a lot of hate speeches in the mosques and all this stuff, which has become pretty much standard in this day and age. And the right-wing politician that was elected sometime back recently, he's taking a very tough stance against all the nonsense that's been created in the country because of Islam, and they're actually banning a lot of the groups, mosques, and deporting a lot of troublemakers out of the country. That's a very pleasant thing to hear.
yeah. Well, thank you.
What's your personal opinion? Do you see any way back for Western Europe from what we've seen as far as
Is it lost, as they say?
We are seriously in trouble at the moment, I agree. No, I think it's not too late yet, but it's urgent.
Urgent. Yes, urgent would be a fair assessment.
Like for instance, now the elections in Sweden,
Yeah.
it was necessary to vote for the Sweden Democrats who wanted to stop Islamization. They have gained. I mean, I see that the papers are trying to present it as like they've lost. No, you see they've gained like 6% or so, but not enough. And so there you can wonder, you see, isn't the European population too slow with it, too complacent? And I'm afraid that is true.
So basically, the lesson for America is we're not there yet. We better act before we get there.
Yes.
Would that be fair?
Exactly.
We'll take a couple more questions. Mike, you have one? Yes.
Thank you for everything you do. Growing up in India, I went to school in India, none of this history I learned, and because all of it was whitewashed. And so a lot of the Hindus in India are raised secular without knowing their true history. So it kind of makes sense why India is that way, with a lot of leftists. Why here in America, the situation where there are so many leftists? Is that because of the education system that it's they're not teaching the history, or is it the media? What can be done about it?
Yeah, well, one difference between India and America is that I would say that over here, reaction has been swifter and more effective. You see, I mean, here you have people like Robert Spencer, who spread the truth about Islam. It's readily available, just a mouse click away. Whereas in India, it has taken decades to develop some kind of criticism of Islam, and nothing much is being added to it. It's not being actively spread. It's certainly not entering the school textbooks. Over here, reaction is better, is more conscious, is more combative.
I'll build on that. Dr. David Wood, who came in and spoke, who's a great Christian apologist, he has about 20 different languages that they're turning their YouTube videos, which are highly entertaining and informative. And I'm not sure if he has for India, but the number of countries he's adding, and the power of the internet, that word is getting out. And that's what's so encouraging. That's what's not been out there before. I grew up in a day and age where there wasn't internet. You don't look nearly as old as I do, so it was probably around a little bit, but still the reality was it's just now beginning to get to the tipping point, and that hurts the imams, that hurts the mosque, the madrasas, because now there's a counter argument. So you can find stuff on the internet now that you could never have found before, you know, these presentations.
Where are all these leftists coming from in America? Where are they?
We've grown them up since the 60s, and even before. We go back to the 40s, the 30s. I mean, the communists, progressives have been here. You know, Saul Alinsky, names that you may not recognize, but for anyone who grew up in the 40s and 50s and 60s, those were all people who were laying the foundation. But the progressive movement has been in America since the 20s, and it has just metastasized into different versions. And they learn their lessons. They've learned their lessons. So, and now they're at a point where they're in the academics. The ones who were in the 60s who were walking the streets with signs, they're now all the heads of departments. And who do they hire? You know, from an academic standpoint. So we were talking about that earlier. Any other? Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes.
I think this is for
If he came closer up here, he's part of it, it's a distance deal with that
just come up a
mic.
little bit closer. There you go.
Okay. You were saying
We should be careful.
might come here. Something like that you just now said, right?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Roger made a statement just now that US should be careful that the similar things happening to
Europe.
Yeah. Well, I think in Frisco already the things have started. It's called, you want to call it soft jihad. So one of the schools in Frisco.
Yeah, one of the schools in Frisco already had
Friday off or
prayer
off.
even though
Public school. So
this is one of the first
That mic's not good.
Yes, I think what you're saying is that the soft jihad that's going on in schools and others, it is occurring in our society. I just saw a presentation today from materials that were created here in San Antonio. That was one of the slickest presentations on Islam. It was in a nice little bag, looked like one of these bags my wife brings home when she goes shopping. And it has beautiful books, CDs, and it's specifically addressed for Christians on how to answer and how to come to Islam. And their ability to be so slick about this is what's deceptive for many and dangerous for so many people here in America who are getting exposed to it. So they do learn. Yes?
In real life also, attack is the best form of defense, right? So Islam, we talk about caste system and Hinduism, divisions in society, but someone rightly pointed out in Islam, Shias and Sunnis, they kill each other, right? At least in the degraded form of the caste system, one person may not invite the other for an event. That's the maximum, right? But in Shias and Sunnis, they kill each other. They talk about women's rights, but then they cover the women in black clothing that only the eyes are seeing.
Right.
So it's full of contradictions, but is there a concerted effort to expose these contradictions and these, these anti-women, anti-human attitude of Islam? There is CARE, which is very much pro-Islam. Are there big organizations or efforts like that to counter them, attack them, and not give them time to attack others?
We're all the feminists, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the reasons why we're in existence. Our group is to try to do that, to have that discussion, to bring that. I travel around the country speaking of those. Robert Spencer, a lot of these folks we've had here come and speak about that. So it's really up to us as individuals that when we hear misinformation, when we're having a conversation with one of our neighbors and we overhear someone, we have to be knowledgeable enough about that topic to be able to engage with it without coming down and hitting hitting them over the head with a hammer, is engage with them with facts. And I think that's important. And really, as a woman, and as a brown woman who experiences, who knows your own culture, you have something that I could never pull from. And that is the experience of your country. And as a woman, understanding women who have been oppressed under the Islamic, and you've seen it or at least know about it. And that is such a powerful weapon, which is the truth.
Doing it at an individual level is one thing, but coming together and doing this as a group, as a society, definitely has a big impact.
Political candidates, the next meeting we have, we're going to be inviting as many candidates, Republican candidates, to come and hear, and not so much to give their speech, but we're going to tell them, if you're going to come, we want you to stay, because we want you to hear about what's going on. And it's not just come and make your pitch, then don't come here. We'll let you make your pitch, but that's where, and this is where, again, material, we have that kind of material, is go and see your local city councilman, go and see your local school board member, go and visit them. It's the one-on-one and explaining it. And we're happy to get engaged in that. If you ask us, we'll come with you and meet with them over lunch or whatever and have that one-on-one experiences. Because sometimes in a mass meeting, it's not always the best way to engage someone.
To expound on what Roy said, all politics is local, and even this issue is local. It starts at the local level. And this election season, there were about 100 Muslim candidates that ran, out of which 50% made it through the primary stage. So we know they're making efforts. So if we can form an action committee, take action against that, and hold our local public officials accountable, that's where we're going to make a change. It's not going to be a top-down, it's going to be a bottom-up.
Steve, Pastor Branson.
I just wanted to say this. Some of you know I go to Cuba all the time. I've been there about 9 times in the last 3 years, going again here soon. And I'm helping the president of Havana Seminary to get a PhD here in America. This church is paying for him to go to school and get his education. And so the first time he ever came to the United States 3 years ago, I took him out to eat. Their food in Cuba is not very good. Steaks are the worst thing in the world there, so I offered him anywhere to eat in Dallas, Fort Worth area, and he wanted a steak. So I took him to one of the best restaurants, and so we're sitting there having a good meal, enjoying our time, just a guy's night talking. I'd been with Donald Trump about 8 weeks earlier, and he was wanting to know about my meeting with Donald Trump. And there was a bunch of us in New York City met with him when he became the Republican nominee. So I was telling him about that when all of a sudden he pushed away from the table and started to leave the restaurant. Thought he was getting up to go to the bathroom, but then he just sat there. And I kind of stopped, looked at him a minute, and all of a sudden he pulled his chair back up and we continued our conversation. I didn't think about it again. I then took him to the seminary to lay him out, and he said, "Thank you." And I said, "I hope you had a good time." He said, "I'm not thanking you for a good time." He said, "I'm thanking you because I'm sitting in a restaurant and you're talking about your president or president-to-be." And he said, "I got scared. I got so scared I won't leave the restaurant." He said, "I was ready for somebody to arrest us and we disappeared." And then I realized I'm not in Cuba. I'm in America. And he said this, "Do you know what y'all have?" I said, "Probably not. We are so used to what we have." When I go to Cuba, I speak there all the time. I'm good friends with General Boykin, one of the famous American military leaders. He and I have been good friends for several years now. I cannot use his name. I cannot talk in friendship of my relationship with him because I will get somebody arrested. So I'm here to tell you, we have a freedom here, and you and I have got to stand up and speak. And if you do that, it has power. As you know, I saved Sergeant Monk's career 5 years ago. I was a national story. I've been on Fox News several times because of all that. And I learned if you speak the truth, you just keep speaking, and you do it a good way, you get people's attention and you can win. So all of this to tell us is you can't stay silent. I don't care who you are, where you live. You speak truth, you speak it in a good way, and you have the boldness to stand up, and God will bless that in a good way, and we will overcome a lot of this.
And that's why we chose our name with G416 Patriots. That's what Paul said to do, is tell the truth. You may make an enemy, but at the end of the day, we've got someone higher that we answer to. So I'll have you some closing comments and then we'll.
All right. What the brown lady said, what's her name from India, I suppose?
Yes.
Yes. All the pro-Islamic talk over here has a number of sources. Usually it starts with young people who know what they're against but not what they're for. So they're against white Christian evangelical right-wing establishment, though it is more an oppositional force than an establishment by now. And so they're against that, and therefore they're in favor of everything that goes against it. And so they're in favor of Islam. Now, 30 years ago, Islam was still a pretty academic subject, but gradually as Islam becomes stronger and more established over here, it comes out more and more in its true colors. Take, for instance, the issue of female genital mutilation. You cannot possibly imagine a feminist being in favor of that. You see, they were always fulminating against the patriarchal power structure and so on. But you see, this female genital mutilation is a very direct oppression of women. Yet, you see, by being in favor of Islam, gradually they move towards the implication, oh, but in that case I have to be in favor of female genital mutilation. Or at least you see, sort of plead in favor of it, plead against those who are against it. Now, because of this history, inertia forcing them to keep on being in favor of Islam, even though it becomes more and more being in favor of totally intolerable practices. It should be possible even to convince them, you see, to make them see the error of their ways. See, because at heart they are not in favor of female genital mutilation. Now you have top feminists who say they are, like Germaine Greer from Australia. She said, yeah, it's like cosmetic operation. You see, trying to, you see, they don't want to say I'm in favor of it, but they want to sort of put, sabotage the debate by minimizing the issue. So, you see, some of these people have gone too far in that direction. Maybe they're lost by now. But you see, most of these people, if you approach them in the correct way, can be brought around. Just as Muslims themselves can be brought around to leaving Islam, non-Muslims can be brought around to stopping with this pleading in favor of Islam.
Well, I just want to say, first of all, you've done something by coming here tonight. I think we've all learned an awful lot tonight. We can walk away armed with information that we can engage others with, and we can do it in a way that's in a loving way, but in a factual way, and hopefully convince people. So it's our next meeting, like I said, will be on Tuesday, October the 16th. We'll send out the newsletter. Again, you can sign up for the newsletter out front if you didn't get it. Dr. Elst, I want to say thank you on behalf of all of us here. Let's give Dr. Elst a big round of applause. Thank Roger for arranging Dr. Elst coming to visit with us, and all the way from Belgium. So he's flying out tomorrow morning to catch a flight back home, I believe. So we're, again, thank you for all your time and your dedication, your contributions, and we hope to see you next month here back at Village Parkway Baptist Church at 6:30 for Dr. Bill Federer. So thanks a lot. Dr. Elst will be around later if you'd like to ask him some more questions. Thank you.